This isn't so much a reflection on the game against Spurs at the weekend, but a reflection of the malaise that we've been in our season overall. Let's start briefly with the game against Tottenham Hotspur, shall we? The two clubs have shared a rivalry that goes back almost 130 years, started way back when we were still the Thames Ironworks, playing against Spurs in leagues like the Thames and the Medway leagues, way back as far as 1898. And then throughout the years, we kept meeting each other in the Southern League, the Western League, and the London League before settling on the Football League and meeting them there for the first time in 1920. We've played Tottenham Hotspur 225 times over the last 127 odd years in all competitions, and Sunday's game seemed to be the most insignificant of the lot of them. There have been some unique memories for both sides over the years, of course. Probably the one that sticks in recent minds was the Manuel Lanzini pile driver in the dying seconds of the game during COVID lockdown. But I'm sure most fans will have memories of their own significant moments against Spurs over the years. There's always been a nervous energy when we play Tottenham Hotspur, the excitement and the tension that it would create. It would be one of the first games that we would look out for in the season fixtures that are announced in the summer. But this time around, with the season drawing to a close, Sunday's game felt completely meaningless. As far as both teams are concerned, the Premier League this season has been done and dusted for quite some time. Nothing to play for, not even for a bit of pride. Now, had we beaten Spurs, we would have gone above them. Great, but scant consolation for finishing 16th in the league rather than 17. That's hardly a bragging right. And Sunday's game was a game that to be honest, I've already forgotten about in a way. In fact, if you watch the post-match review that I did outside the stadium, I couldn't really find the words to describe what I'd watched. You know, one of the most insipid encounters between these two teams in recent years. Where were the talking points? Well, I guess there were one or two. Maybe a controversial goal for Spurs after what looked like a bit of a handball. But even then, Max Kilman had at least two opportunities to clear his lines, which he didn't. If ever there was a player you'd question his price tag over as the season has worn on, it's got to be Max Kilman at £40 million. Strange that Wolves seem to have improved their defence without him, but I digress. Other notable moments in the game? Well, a superb reply from Jared Bowen, who, along with Aaron Wan-Bissaka, just seemed to be carrying the whole team at the moment. And then, of course, the tears of Lucas Paqueta, who looks as if he's just about had his fill of the Premier League. I just cannot see us keeping hold of Paqueta this summer, no matter what the outcome of the FA hearing will bring. And the second half was played as if we were watching this game in Florida on a pre-season friendly tournament organised by the Premier League. If there is of any consolation to the end of this season, it's knowing that all three teams who were promoted last season were not able to withstand the pressure of the Premier League, and they've all been relegated. Had they been any better, then we could have seen the bottom three comprising of West Ham, Tottenham Hotspur, and Manchester United. Imagine those three teams, or three teams like that, being relegated in one go. And maybe that's what it might take to break this inertia that seems to engulf West Ham at the moment that we seem to find ourselves in. We cannot raise our game even against one of our oldest rivals. And yet what was worse in this game was that Spurs could even have the bragging rights yet again for saying that we couldn't even beat their B team at our own ground. Ange Postecoglou has been rotating to keep his squad fresh for the Europa League, and who can blame him? Spurs are now just 2 wins away from lifting a trophy that can see them playing in the Champions League next season. How much would that be rubbing salt into the wound? That's the prize, despite the fact that we might finish one place and 1 point. That they might finish one place and 1 point above us at the bottom end of the Premier League this season. The reality for Spurs is that they fly out to Norway on Wednesday, and even if they actually lose by a goal, Postecoglou's decision to put the Premier League second to the Europa League will be well and truly justified. But that's not the case for West Ham. What reason do we have for not being able to raise our game against a rival like Tottenham Hotspur? West Ham have none of that to fall back on this season. No European football, no European dream to be chasing, unlike, of course, our 2023 season. Now, even though we were poor in the second half of that season, Europe kept us all engaged, kept us all excited. So we know exactly what Spurs fans might be feeling right now. Premier League to one side, European football is what it's all about. We've got 3 matches left this season, and then we've got a long summer ahead of us. Next season, we will need to be better in every department, and that really does start with our summer transfer window. And one of the things that West Ham have to get right during the transfer window is the balance and the harmony of this squad. Yet again, we're hearing there's dressing room unrest. Bust-ups between previous manager Julen Lopetegui and players like Jean-Claire Todibo, Alphonse Areola and Mohamed Kudus. And it led, of course, to Lopetegui being the club's shortest-serving manager in our history. And we all thought that the calm demeanour of Graham Potter would overcome such tensions, but apparently not so. According to a report that was put out by The Athletic, there has apparently been yet more tension and fighting breaking out between players, with morale continuing to be quite low. We as fans can only guess who's involved in this. Look at Nicholas Fulkrug, for example. His outburst a few weeks ago seemed to point fingers in certain directions. And then, of course, the dropping of Edson Alvarez from the squad is maybe another pointer. Now, Alvarez was definitely fit for the game against Spurs, but yet again, didn't even make the bench, let alone the first 11. Our winless Premier League run is the longest since January 2023. The last team that we beat was Leicester City on February the 27th. And as many will tell you, that was hardly a convincing win. Now, club insiders admit that the pressure is felt across the board, but they remain hopeful. The board remain hopeful that Potter will turn it all around. The head coach signed a 2.5-year contract, and contrary to popular belief, this deal does not have a break clause in it. Now, it's common knowledge that David Sullivan wasn't overly keen on Potter taking over, and the club did interview other candidates, as we already know. Former Milan manager Paulo Fonseca flew to London to meet David Sullivan, and apparently the talks were quite positive. But his camp got the impression that Potter was West Ham's preferred option. Certainly for Karen Brady it was. Many talk about managers who have taken over mid-seasons, offering clubs new manager bounce back, like Moyes at Everton and Vitor Pereira at Wolves. But there is a flip side to that, of course. Ruben Amorim at Man United, Ruud van Nistelrooy at Leicester, Ivan Juric at Southampton, and of course, Graham Potter at West Ham. And all those managers, including Potter, haven't been able to bring that new manager bounce back to the clubs that they're managing respectively. But when there are fundamental problems that we keep hearing about within the squad and the players not seeing eye to eye, then I'm not sure whether Potter, Fonseca, or any other successor to Lopetegui would have made the slightest bit of difference. Getting rid of Lopetegui was the right thing to do. It was chaotic. But what he's left behind can only and hopefully be cleaned up when this summer transfer window opens. West Ham have sporadically shown progress under Potter. The encouraging performances against Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, etc. But Potter's got a paltry return of just 3 wins in 15 Premier League games. And the last minute 3-2 defeat to Brighton the weekend before last was the breaking point, even for Potter, it seemed, which, as we've all seen during the post-match press conference, you could see a man under real pressure trying to find the answers to the conundrum that it's laid before him. Now, in the pre-match press conference to the Spurs game, this demeanour seemed far happier. He admitted how West Ham's struggles have already affected his family life. And many would worry that if he's actually finding it difficult now, when there's really nothing to play for, then how's he going to cope if we continue this poor run of form and results next season? Summer signings will dictate Potter's success next season. He's already stated that it will be an exciting window, but at the same time, he has also suggested that the squad needs minor tweaks rather than a complete overhaul. Now, I think we already know that there's going to be a number of players leaving. The likes of Mohamed Kudus could be sold this summer to help fund the rebuild. And despite stories suggesting that we might sell Kudus for half the money that his release clause dictates, we know there is no way on earth that he's going to be allowed to be able to leave on the cheap. You see, that's the beauty of a release clause. If a club doesn't meet it, we have absolutely no obligation to sell a player. And to be honest, if we keep Kudus, I'm not sure whether that would be such a bad idea. But if we keep Kudus, then we've got to be playing him in a position that's going to suit him. He doesn't like it out on the left. We don't like seeing him out on the left. I think we've got no choice because of Crescencio Somerville being injured since Potter's first game. But that's where Kudus is playing, and that's where Kudus is. You can see the endeavour. I mean, he's crossing the ball in, getting in there, etc. But we know he can be far more dangerous in the middle of the park. And that's what I would want to see next season. If we keep Kudus, I want to see him as a central attacking midfielder with Bowen out on the right-hand side, Somerville when he returns on the left-hand side, and then, of course, a striker up front. Now, the one thing that West Ham certainly won't entertain this summer is a bid for Jarrod Bowen. Sure, money talks, but if it would have to take an extortionate offer for West Ham to remotely be considering selling the 28-year-old talisman. But a squad overhaul is vital, and the usual names are likely to be leaving because of contracts ending. We all know who they are: Creswell, Zuma, Fabianski, Antonio, Ings and Soufal. That's 6 players already. But in addition to these players, we must ensure that those who are deemed to be disruptive to this current squad are also moved on. And as I've mentioned a moment ago, all eyes seem to be on Edson Alvarez. Whether this is correct or not, I genuinely don't know. But who else could prove to be disruptive? Kudus himself, who's not looked himself all season. Todibo, who had a bust-up with Lopetegui. Although we hear he's a quiet family man away from football, maybe he's quite different around, the team. Or could it be Fulkrug because of his outburst? The one common factor between Kudus, Alvarez, Todibo and Fulkrug was, of course, Tim Steidten. It was he who was credited in persuading these players to sign for West Ham because of the promise of what? European football? Maybe more? I don't know. And clearly it hasn't worked out. And maybe this is why these players are just not happy being at West Ham. I've said this before. When the lure of European football is on the table, players are more than happy to sign for a club. The minute that isn't on offer, these players may no longer feel an affinity or the need to stay at a club like West Ham beyond this season. Look, it won't surprise me if we see all of these players leaving in the summer. And that's alongside the players that are out of contract, as well as players who just are not delivering in the Premier League, which is Guido Rodriguez, Carlos Soler, and Evan Ferguson. When questioned about the squad, Potter replied, "It's hard to say at the moment. I think I wouldn't want to quantify it." This is about the squad. There is a saying, isn't there? If you can't change people, change people. That's a clear indication that he's definitely looking at moving quite a number of players on this coming summer. We have to make decisions, he said, that make sure the club is in a better place going forward. We're working with the players that we have. We're working all the time to try and get to the levels that we want. Very diplomatic of Potter, but you can read between the lines. He already knows that's who he needs to probably move on this coming summer in order to get a better harmony within the squad. Because if we are left with a few bad apples in the squad next season, then I fear it'll be a season which might prove to be a lot tougher and a lot worse than the current one. And if that proves to be tougher and worse, then there's only one way that it could end. And we know damn well that we didn't move from Upton Park in order to be playing in the Championship 10 years on.